The night air of New York City shimmered with golden lights. Expensive cars lined the streets. Music floated from a grand hotel and laughter echoed through the glass walls. Inside, among the glow of chandeliers and flashes of cameras, Elena Carter stood still, poised, elegant, and breathtaking. She was the woman everyone admired. The self-made millionaire, the face of success, owner of one of the biggest fashion brands in America. Her name had become a symbol of power and perfection. Reporters called her the Queen of Dreams. But behind her beautiful smile, Elena felt a quiet ache that never left. Her eyes stared into the mirror as her stylist adjusted the diamond necklace around her neck. It sparkled like a crown, but she felt nothing. "Perfect," the stylist said proudly. Elena forced a smile. Perfect, everyone said that word to her. But what no one knew was that she didn't feel perfect at all. Tonight was a big night, the 10th anniversary of her company. The ballroom was filled with business icons, celebrities, and admirers. Champagne glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and the photographers waited for her to make her grand entrance. Elena took a deep breath, fixing her gown. As she walked out into the hall, the crowd cheered. People wanted to touch her, talk to her, praise her. She smiled, posed for photos, and shook hands. Every word she said was smooth, polite, practiced. She had become an expert in hiding her real emotions, but deep inside, a part of her was tired of the act, tired of pretending she was happy, and then everything changed. As her eyes moved across the crowded ballroom, she froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hand trembled slightly as the champagne glass tilted in her fingers. At the far end of the hall, standing near a painting, away from the lights, was a man she never expected to see again. Marcus Hayes, her ex-husband. Her heart skipped a beat. 10 years. 10 long years had passed since she last saw him. Since that night when everything between them broke apart. He looked different now, calmer, older, but still strong. His dark skin glowed gently under the warm light. His eyes, deep and thoughtful, were the same ones that once looked at her like she was his entire world. Elena felt the room spin for a moment. The crowd faded into a blur. The laughter, the music, the lights all disappeared. The only thing she could see was him. He was talking to someone, his voice calm, his smile polite. He looked peaceful, like a man who had finally found his place in life. And that hurt her more than she expected. Elena remembered everything in a rush. The small apartment they once shared. The nights they stayed awake dreaming about the future. The fights, the tears, the way he begged her not to change. She remembered walking out that door, thinking success would fill the hole in her heart. But now, 10 years later, standing in this golden room full of strangers, she realized how wrong she had been. Her assistant whispered beside her, "Ms. Carter, the investors are waiting." But Elena didn't hear. She couldn't move her eyes away from Marcus. He turned slightly, and for a second their eyes met. It felt like time stopped. 1,000 emotions flashed between them. Love, regret, pain, memory. It was as if the past came alive again, whispering everything they once said, everything they once lost. Elena's throat tightened. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Her mind screamed, "Why is he here? After all these years?" Marcus blinked once, gave her a calm, almost unreadable look, and then turned back to the person he was speaking with. That small gesture broke her heart all over again. For the first time in 10 years, Elena Carter, the woman the world admired, felt weak. Her hands trembled as she placed the glass on a nearby table. She forced a smile for the crowd, but inside her heart was trembling like a leaf. She whispered to herself, "Why now, Marcus? Why tonight?" And in that moment, surrounded by luxury, cameras, and fame, Elena realized something she hadn't felt in years. She realized that no amount of money could protect her from the pain of seeing the man she once loved. Standing in front of her again, Elena could hardly focus through the rest of the evening. Her guests congratulated her, investors praised her, but their voices faded into the background like a dull echo. All she could think about was Marcus. Every few minutes her eyes searched for him in the crowd. He was always there, never too close, never too far. Calm, composed, standing quietly as if the celebration wasn't even about her. When the speeches ended and the music slowed, Elena finally gathered the courage to approach him. Her heart pounded in her chest. The crowd seemed to part as she walked across the shining floor in her silver gown. Her heels clicked softly against the marble, but her hands felt cold. Marcus turned as if he sensed her before she even spoke. His deep brown eyes met hers again, steady and unreadable. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded slightly. "Elena." That one word, her name in his voice, sent a wave of emotions through her. It had been so long, yet it felt like yesterday. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said softly, trying to sound confident but failing. "I didn't expect to be here," he replied. "A friend invited me. I didn't know this was your company's event." For a moment, silence hung between them, the kind of silence that carries too many memories. Elena smiled faintly. "You look different," he gave a small laugh. 10 years can do that." She wanted to say more, to ask where he had been, what he was doing, if he ever thought of her, but her throat tightened. All the words she wanted to say for years got stuck somewhere deep inside. Marcus looked around the grand ballroom. "You've done well, Elena. Everything looks perfect." That word again, perfect. It stung more than she expected. She lowered her eyes. "Perfect isn't always happy, Marcus." He nodded slowly. "I know." For a few seconds they stood in silence again. It wasn't the silence of strangers. It was the silence of people who once knew every heartbeat of each other's lives, but now stood on opposite sides of the world. Then, Marcus's friend called him from across the room. He gave Elena a polite nod. "It was good to see you again." She felt a sudden panic. He was leaving. Just like that, again. "Marcus, wait," she said quickly. "Can we talk?" "Later?" He hesitated. His eyes softened for a moment, then he nodded once. "Sure." As he walked away, Elena felt her chest tighten. The rest of the night passed like a blur. People danced, music played, but she stood by the balcony, lost in the storm of her thoughts. When the event finally ended, Elena found Marcus outside the hotel, standing near the fountain. The night was quiet now, the city lights reflecting off the water. She walked toward him slowly. "You stayed," she said. He smiled faintly. "I said I would." For a while neither spoke. The sound of the fountain filled the silence between them. Then Elena said softly, "Do you ever think about the past?" He looked at her. "Sometimes, but not the way I used to. I stopped asking what went wrong." Her eyes filled with tears. "I still ask that question every day." Marcus sighed gently. "You were chasing your dream, Elena. I couldn't stop you." "You didn't even try," she whispered, her voice cracking. He turned to her, his gaze deep. "I tried, Elena, but you were already gone. You stopped looking at me like your husband. You started looking at me like a shadow." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I thought success would make everything better. I thought it would make me forget. Did it?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "No," it made the silence louder. Marcus looked down for a moment, his hands in his pockets. "We both made mistakes. Maybe we weren't ready for the storm that came with our dreams." Elena stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I never stopped caring about you, Marcus. Even when I tried to forget, I couldn't." He looked into her eyes for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then he said softly, "Some things aren't meant to be forgotten, they just stop hurting after a while." The wind blew gently between them. For a moment, Elena wanted to reach out and hold his hand like before, but she didn't. The distance between them was not just space, it was 10 years of silence, regret, and unspoken love. As Marcus walked away into the night, Elena whispered into the cold air, "I wish I had loved you better." And though he didn't turn back, she saw his shoulders tense slightly. like he heard her. The night after the event, Elena could not sleep. She tossed and turned in her large, lonely bed, staring at the ceiling as memories flooded her mind like old ghosts refusing to leave. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's face, calm, mature, but distant. His words kept echoing inside her head. Some things aren't meant to be forgotten. By morning, she gave up on sleep completely. She sat by the window of her penthouse watching the city wake up below her. Cars moving, people rushing, dreams chasing dreams. Once she used to find peace in this view, but now all she saw was emptiness. She had money, fame, luxury, but not the one thing her heart truly wanted: peace. Later that day, she told her assistant to cancel all her meetings. She needed quiet. She needed space to think. Her mind wandered back to Marcus. She remembered the first day they met. She was a young designer trying to sell her sketches at a street fair, and he was a struggling artist painting portraits for tourists. He had smiled at her and said, "You look like someone who believes in magic," and she had laughed. That was the start of everything. Those days were simple. They shared coffee, dreams, and small hopes. They promised each other forever, but forever had turned into 10 years apart. Now he was back, standing so close yet feeling so far away. Elena couldn't bear the thought of leaving things like that. She needed to see him again, not to fix the past, but to understand it. So that evening she sent him a message through a mutual friend. It was short and hesitant. "Marcus, can we meet? Just once more. I'd like to talk." Hours passed with no reply. Her heart grew heavy with every tick of the clock. She almost gave up until her phone buzzed. One simple message appeared. "Tomorrow, 5 p.m. the cafe on 7th Street. Elena stared at the screen for a long time before whispering, "Thank you." The next day came slowly. She dressed simply. No diamonds, no makeup glamour, just a soft white blouse and jeans. For the first time in years, she wanted to look like herself again, not the Elena Carter the world adored. When she reached the small cafe, she saw him sitting by the window, reading a book. He looked peaceful, like someone who had learned to live without noise. As she walked in, he looked up and their eyes met once again. This time there was no shock, only quiet understanding. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," he replied with a small smile. She sat across from him. For a moment they just looked at each other, unsure where to begin. Finally she said, "You still read the same books?" He smiled faintly. "Some things don't change." Elena looked at her hands. "Marcus, I wanted to see you because I needed to say I'm sorry." He said nothing. She continued, her voice trembling. "Back then I was so focused on success. I forgot what really mattered. I hurt you and I never even said sorry. I just walked away." Marcus's eyes softened. "You were chasing something you believed in. I can't hate you for that." "But you did," she whispered. "I was angry," he admitted. "But hate? No, I could never hate you, Elena." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't know how many nights I wished I could go back, just to tell you that I still loved you." Marcus leaned back, his expression calm but sad. "Maybe we both needed to fall apart to become who we are now." The waiter brought coffee, but neither touched it. They just sat there, two souls once tangled together, now trying to untangle their pain. After a long silence, Marcus said softly, "You look tired, Elena. You have everything people dream of, yet you look lonely." Her voice broke. "Because I am. I have everything, Marcus, except peace, and you always had that." He gave her a gentle smile. "Peace doesn't come from success. It comes from forgiveness." "Then teach me how to forgive myself," she whispered. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes full of something deep and unspoken. "Maybe this is where it starts," he said quietly. They both sat there until the sun began to set, their hearts heavy yet strangely lighter. The past was still between them, but something inside had begun to heal. As they stood to leave, Elena smiled softly. "Can we meet again?" Marcus paused, then nodded slowly. "Yes, one step at a time." And as they walked out into the golden evening light, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The next few days passed slowly, but Elena found herself thinking of Marcus more and more. Their short meeting at the cafe had opened a door she thought was long closed. His calmness, his kindness, his quiet words, all of it stirred something deep inside her. For 10 years she had buried her feelings under work, fame, and endless parties. But now everything she once ignored began to rise again: the memories, the mistakes, and the love that never really died. One evening, she received a text from Marcus. "If you're free tomorrow, meet me at the Riverside Park, 6 p.m. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the message for a long time before replying, "I'll be there." The next evening, the sun was soft and golden as she reached the park. Children laughed in the distance, couples walked hand in hand, and the air smelled of spring. She saw Marcus sitting on a wooden bench near the water, sketching something in a small notebook. He looked peaceful, just like always. She walked toward him quietly. "You still draw?" she asked. He looked up and smiled. "Every day. It keeps me grounded." Elena sat beside him, watching the soft waves move under the sunset. "You used to draw me all the time," she said with a gentle smile. "I remember," he replied. "You were my favorite subject." They both laughed softly, but then silence returned. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with memories. Elena took a deep breath. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Did you ever hate me for what I did?" Marcus closed his notebook slowly. He looked at the water before speaking. "No," he said finally. "I was hurt, angry, lost, but hate? No, I loved you too much to hate you." Tears filled her eyes. "I thought leaving you would make me happy. I thought success would fill the empty space inside me." He turned to her gently. "Did it?" She shook her head. "No, it made me colder. I kept achieving more, but I felt less alive. I built an empire, but I lost myself." Marcus's eyes softened. "You didn't lose yourself, Elena. You just forgot who you were." His words hit her heart like soft rain on dry earth. She looked down, her hands trembling slightly. "I wish I could go back," she whispered. "I'd do everything differently," he smiled sadly. "We all wish that sometimes. But the past doesn't change. We only do." Elena turned to him. "And you changed too. You're calmer, stronger. You seem at peace." Marcus chuckled softly. "Peace came with acceptance. I learned to forgive, not just you, but myself too." She looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "I blamed myself for a long time," he said quietly. "For not being enough. For not understanding you. But one day I realized love isn't about keeping someone. It's about wishing them well even when they walk away." Elena's lips trembled. "You were always better than me, Marcus," he smiled. "No, Elena, I just broke earlier. And when something breaks, you either shatter or rebuild stronger." His words were calm, but they filled her eyes with tears. She had spent years proving herself to the world. Yet this one man's forgiveness felt like the greatest victory she could ever have. For a long while, they sat in silence, watching the sky turn orange and pink. Then Marcus asked softly, "Do you ever paint anymore?" She laughed lightly. "I haven't touched a brush since we separated. I was afraid of what I'd feel." "Maybe you should try again," he said. "Sometimes art is how we talk when words aren't enough." His voice was gentle, full of warmth. Elena looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. "You really think I can still start over?" He nodded. "You already did. You came here." Those simple words made her chest ache. For years she had lived surrounded by people, but she had never felt seen. Now, sitting beside Marcus by the water, she felt understood again, like the lost part of her soul had finally been found. As the sun set, Marcus stood up. "It's getting late." Elena rose too, hesitating. "Will I see you again?" He smiled softly. If it's meant to be, yes. And with that he walked away slowly, the golden light wrapping around his figure. Elena watched him go, her eyes wet but her heart strangely lighter. For the first time in 10 years, she felt something she hadn't felt in forever. The beginning of healing. Days turned into weeks. But Elena couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. Their conversations at the cafe and the park replayed in her mind again and again. Every word he spoke stayed with her, like a soft echo she couldn't silence. She started to see the world differently. Her busy office, her grand apartment, her endless meetings, and everything suddenly felt hollow. The things that once made her proud now seemed meaningless. She began to realize that all her success, all her fame, had come with a price she could never repay. One morning, while scrolling through the news, Elena froze. There it was, a small article at the bottom of the page. Local artist opens small gallery downtown, inspires with paintings of hope and healing. And there, in the attached photo, was Marcus. He stood in front of his paintings, smiling gently, surrounded by a few people who admired his art. His clothes were simple, his eyes peaceful. He looked truly happy. Elena's heart ached. For so long she had thought of him as someone she had broken, but now she saw him as someone who had rebuilt himself. Stronger, kinder, freer. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and decided to go. When she arrived at the small gallery downtown, she stood quietly at the entrance, watching him from afar. The walls were covered with beautiful paintings, colors full of emotion and depth. Every stroke told a story. Then her eyes fell on one particular painting. It showed a woman standing in the rain holding her heart in her hands while sunlight broke through the clouds behind her. The emotion in the image made her chest tighten. She stepped closer and whispered, "That's me." Marcus turned at the sound of her voice. Surprise filled his eyes, followed by a gentle smile. "Elena," she smiled nervously. "I saw the article. I had to come." He looked around, a little shy. "It's small, but it's mine." She walked toward him slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "It's beautiful, Marcus. Every piece feels alive." "Thank you," he said softly. "Art became my way to speak when words failed me." Elena looked at the painting again. "That one. The woman in the rain. It's about me, isn't it?" Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "It was. When I painted it, I was trying to let go." Her eyes filled with tears. "You let go." And I kept holding on. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of quiet footsteps and murmured voices filled the gallery. Then slowly, Elena turned toward the small crowd and said in a clear, trembling voice, "I want to buy every painting here." The room fell silent. Marcus's eyes widened. "Elena, what are you doing?" She stepped closer to him, her eyes shining. "I'm not doing this to own your art, Marcus. I'm doing it, to honor you." "Elena," he began, but she interrupted gently. "You spent years turning pain into beauty. You made peace with the past when I couldn't. The world needs to see that. Let me help you show them." Her voice broke near the end, but she didn't care. Tears ran down her face freely now. Marcus looked at her, really looked, and saw not the millionaire everyone admired, but the woman he had once loved. The same woman who once dreamed beside him, laughed with him, and cried with him. "Elena," he said softly, "you don't need to fix anything. You already gave me something more precious than money, forgiveness." But she shook her head. "No, Marcus. This isn't about money. It's about gratitude. You reminded me who I used to be." A quiet moment passed between them, heavy with emotion. Then Marcus smiled faintly. "If this is really what you want." "Okay." Elena nodded, wiping her tears. "It is. And I want your art to be everywhere. I'll make sure people know your name." He gave a soft laugh. "You always did know how to make a scene." She smiled through her tears. "Maybe this time it's for something real." As the evening went on, the gallery filled with whispers and admiration. People looked at Elena's gesture with awe, but she didn't care about the attention. For her, it wasn't a performance. It was a confession, a way of saying all the words her heart had held back for years. That night, when Marcus closed the gallery, he found her still standing there, looking at his paintings one last time. She turned to him and said softly, "You painted your pain into beauty, Marcus. I just wanted to be part of that beauty again." And for the first time in a long, long time, they both smiled, not as ex-lovers, but as two souls who finally understood each other again. The night after the gallery event, Elena sat by her window looking out at the silent city. The lights below shimmered like fallen stars, but her mind was far away, still back at the small gallery where Marcus's art had touched her heart in ways she couldn't explain. She thought of his words, "You don't need to fix anything," but deep down, she knew that gesture wasn't about fixing. It was about healing. For the first time in years, she felt peace instead of pride. It wasn't the kind that came from success or applause. It was quiet, deep and real. The next morning, she received a message from Marcus. "Thank you for last night. I didn't expect that. Can we talk?" Elena's lips curved into a small smile. Without thinking twice, she replied, "Yes, the same cafe." By evening, she was there, waiting. When Marcus entered, dressed simply in a gray jacket and jeans, she felt a strange calm wash over her. This time there was no awkwardness and only familiarity. He sat down and smiled softly. "You caused quite a storm last night." "My phone hasn't stopped ringing." Elena laughed gently. "Good. You deserve to be seen." He looked at her with gentle eyes. "You didn't have to do that, you know." "I know," she said quietly. "But I wanted to. That was the first time in years I felt something real." Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You always had a big heart, Elena, even when you tried to hide it behind your work." She lowered her eyes. "Maybe I was afraid of being human. When you're rich and famous, people expect perfection. They don't want to see you break." He took a sip of coffee. "But perfection is lonely. You can't share it with anyone." She looked at him with a small, sad smile. "I learned that too late." For a while they sat quietly, letting the soft music fill the space between them. Then Marcus asked, "Do you ever regret it? All of it?" Elena sighed deeply. "Sometimes. But not for the reasons people think. I don't regret chasing my dream. I regret losing the person who believed in it first." Marcus's eyes softened. "I never stopped believing in you, Elena. Even when I was angry, I still knew you'd become something great." Her eyes glistened. "Then why did it feel like I lost everything when I gained the world?" He smiled gently. "Because love and success aren't the same thing. One fills your hands, the other fills your soul." His words hit her heart with quiet power. For years she had tried to fill the silence inside her with things: money, fame, applause. But none of it had ever reached that empty space Marcus was talking about. Tears formed in her eyes. "You always had the words I needed," she whispered. Marcus leaned back, looking at her with warmth. "Maybe that's because you were always the reason I found them." She smiled through her tears. "I missed this. The way you talk. The way you see things." He looked down for a moment, his voice gentle. "We can't go back, Elena, but we can forgive." She nodded. "I know I don't want to go back. I just want to make peace. With you, with myself." Marcus reached out, his hand resting softly on hers. It was the first time they had touched in 10 years. The moment felt fragile and powerful all at once. "Elena," he said quietly, "you don't owe me anything. What you did, buying those paintings, and that was more than enough." She shook her head slowly. "No, Marcus. What I owe you is gratitude. You were the only one who loved me when I was nothing, and somehow, you still cared when I was everything." His eyes grew moist. "You were never nothing. You were just lost." A tear slipped down her cheek. "And you helped me find my way again." They sat there hand in hand as the evening sun painted the cafe in gold. The city outside moved fast, but for them, time slowed. Two broken hearts finding quiet healing and forgiveness. As they stood to leave, Marcus smiled softly. Maybe this is our second chance. Not to fall in love again, but to finally be free. Elena nodded, her voice trembling. Yes, free and grateful. And when they walked out into the soft glow of sunset, both of them knew something beautiful had changed. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled them. It had turned into something gentler, something called peace. Weeks passed after that meeting, and something inside Elena began to shift. She started spending less time in boardrooms and more time in quiet places, the kind where her heart could breathe again. The walls of her mansion didn't feel as cold anymore. Maybe it was because Marcus's voice still echoed in her mind, reminding her that peace wasn't in perfection, but in forgiveness. She visited his gallery often, not as a millionaire, but as a woman rediscovering herself. Sometimes she bought coffee for him and his assistants. Sometimes she just watched him paint, his hands steady, his soul calm. There was a beauty in his simplicity that she had forgotten existed. One evening, Marcus invited her to a small art show in a local community center. It wasn't fancy. No cameras, no press, just children and young artists showing their dreams on canvas. When she entered, she saw Marcus standing beside a large painting covered with a white sheet. The crowd was small, but the warmth in the room was real. Marcus looked at her before pulling off the cloth, and her breath caught in her throat. It was a portrait of her, but not the version the world knew. Not the elegant, diamond-wearing businesswoman. It was her younger self sitting on a broken park bench, eyes full of hope and fear. Behind her, faintly painted, was Marco, holding out his hand, offering her light. A hush filled the room. The painting was raw, real, and heartbreakingly beautiful. Elena's eyes filled with tears. You painted this?" she whispered. Marcus nodded softly. "It's called Before the Gold. I wanted people to see you before the world did. The woman who dreamed, loved, and never gave up." She pressed a hand to her mouth, emotion trembling in her voice. It's me. The real me," Marcus smiled. "That's the version I fell in love with. And the version I always believed was still there." The room blurred around her as she stepped closer to the painting. Memories flooded her. The nights they spent planning their future, the laughter, the struggles, the tears. She remembered the man who had believed in her before anyone else. And for the first time in 10 years, she felt truly seen. After the show, she found Marcus outside under the streetlight, helping one of the young artists load paintings into a van. When he turned and saw her, he smiled warmly. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "That painting, it broke me." He chuckled softly. "Maybe it was time to break the walls around you." She looked at him for a long moment, then took a deep breath. "Marcus, I want to do something. For the community, for the artists. For people like us," he raised an eyebrow. "Like us?" She nodded. "Dreamers who got lost along the way." That night, Elena made a decision that would change both their lives. She donated a huge part of her wealth to open an art and learning center in Marcus's neighborhood, a place where young artists could paint, study, and grow without worrying about money or judgment. But she didn't name it after herself. She named it the Turner Center, after Marcus's late mother, who had always encouraged him to paint. When Marcus saw the sign a month later, he stood frozen, tears glistening in his eyes. He turned to her, voice trembling. "You didn't have to," she interrupted softly. "It's not charity, Marcus. It's gratitude. You showed me what love looks like when it asks for nothing in return." Marcus looked at her, truly looked. And for a moment, all the years between them disappeared. He stepped closer and whispered, "You've changed, Elena." She smiled through tears. "No, I finally found myself again." Then something unexpected happened. She handed him a small envelope. "Open it." Inside was a letter, handwritten, simple words full of emotion. "You once gave me love when I had nothing. This time I want to give you something back. Not out of guilt, but out of love that never stopped caring. Thank you for saving the best part of me. Marcus folded the letter slowly, his eyes moist. This means more than anything. She placed a hand on his cheek. It's not the money, Marcus. It's the truth. I may be a millionaire now, but you're the richest soul I've ever known. He smiled faintly, whispering, then maybe we both finally won. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of gold and purple. They stood there in silence. Not lovers, not strangers, but two souls who had finally forgiven, healed, and found peace. For Elena, it wasn't her money or fame that changed her life. It was one simple gesture of love, forgiveness, and gratitude that made her truly free. And for Marcus, it wasn't the painting or the center. It was seeing the woman he once loved finally become whole again. Sometimes the most powerful gesture isn't a kiss or a promise. It's the quiet act of forgiving and letting love live again in a new way.